Welcome to yet another episode of LBS, the show that is terrifyingly slow with its releases. See what I did there? And speaking of the horror watching my show, what is scary in video games? As gamers, we join together in various emotional immersions, one of the most prominent ones being fear. And since it is Halloween, I am going to ask a question that has been plaguing my mind for some time now. What is scary? Now, like I said in my critique about Resident Evil 5, fear is a subjective term, as it is an emotional response to a negative stimulus and effectively makes the individual uncomfortable. However, as it is clear, different people are scared by different things, so how can one objectively say that something is scarier than the other? One cannot, that is the first thing to remember. But what one can do is take a look at some countdowns and other videos regarding horror games, and maybe one can obtain some insight into what people react upon and what they find scary, and perhaps find a connecting theme or themes between these. For which I say, God bless the Let's Plays for this. Yes, scream for me! I laugh and pay for your misery! Now, obviously I cannot mention and talk about every single horror game out there, since I have obviously not played every single horror game out there, and this video would be way too long if I did as such. I can even less talk about every single scary moment in video games, even those outside the horror genre, because, well, of obvious reasons that I mentioned just mere seconds ago. However, what I am going to do is mention what some might consider scary and explore some of them and maybe find something. So, is there a pattern to be found here? First off, while one might think that most of these entries would be utilizing the popular Jumpscare or startling event to make you uncomfortable by using something visually or auditory disturbing, several monsters and creatures that seem to be generally the most praised as being great monsters or just scary creatures overall, with some exceptions, are pretty much not portrayed in the startling manner. True, that is not to say that the monsters have some kind of startling scare to them, but many times they do not provide their traditional jump scare of appearing out of nowhere. While examples such as SCP-173 and that piano from Super Mario 64 are startling, both these examples can be seen at first, meaning that you see them before the startling scare occurs. It is only once you approach them, or in SCP-173's case, turn around, when the startling scare occurs. No, the monsters and elements that people seem to praise the most would ironically be from games like Amnesia: The Dark Descent and Silent Hill 2, which both rather emphasize the build-up rather than making the gruesome delivery of a startling scare. Many times, these monsters that are implementing the build-up scares are not even really doing anything, but they still manage to build up the tension and fear, since you are often unaware of what they will do because they are not doing anything. See, it makes sense. An example of this would be the monsters from Amnesia: The Dark Descent, where they are often in plain sight, and while you could take a good look at them, you're doing it at the risk of going insane or getting killed. Since you can't kill these monsters either, it means that you cannot really get a good look at the monsters. This means that you are avoiding these enemies in order to survive, and an enemy thus becomes scarier, because you see less of it. Their presence is always there, however, and because of this, you never feel truly safe while playing. The same element of not being able to defend yourself can be found with the monsters in SCP Containment Breach, as many times you have to be efficient and you can't take too long looking at the main enemy, SCP-173. The reason for this is because in the game there is a blinking meter, sounds weird to say, I know, that automatically drains, meaning that every time it is drained completely, you blink. Very straightforward. However, SCP-173 can only move when not in direct eyesight, meaning that while you need to look at it in order to get away, you can only do it for a short time before it continues to follow after you. This means that in the end, you're not able to defeat any of the enemies in the game. In fact, you will die if you take too long looking at most of the enemies in the game, meaning that you are never really safe. There are quite a few more monsters that are popular among what fans and gamers consider being scary. Among these we have the Regenerators from Resident Evil 4, as well as the Nemesis from Resident Evil 3. Another example is Samus X from Metroid Fusion, who can annihilate you in mere seconds, thus encouraging you to avoid it. The same thing can be applied to Dead Space with the Hunter, a creature that chases you throughout the game and like an X, comes around when you least want it to. Creatures like the Regenerators and the Dead Hand from the Legend of Zelda franchise, who both have unsettling noises to them, are both freaky and horrifying. And of course we have the notorious Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2, arguably the scariest thing in all of video game history. Now, you've probably connected a few dots with these entries and noticed at least two distinct traits that they share. First off, the unknown aspect of them. The fact that they are something unnerving and unusual, something we cannot comprehend, like the enemies from SCP Containment Breach or Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Essentially, we cannot fully understand what they are. This also includes things that are designed in such a fashion to look as something distorted, like the enemies from Dead Space and especially their piano from Super Mario 64, because, as JonTron so elegantly put it,
it's probably just because it's a freaking piano with teeth in it in Mario 64!
Pyramid Head is also a very good example of this. Because it is wearing its helmet, its actions become all the more unnerving. Because as it is a human, we look towards the face to observe emotions, but because there is a lack of face or even a voice in this scenario, this becomes disturbing as we have no way of identifying Pyramid Head's feelings. The same thing can be said for their powers, like SCP-173 speed, Pyramid Head's inhuman strength and immortality, and the Regenerators' regenerative abilities. This in turn leads me to the second trait that makes them scary, helplessness, but not on their end, on ours. In video games, we're used to being able to defeat enemies and dominate our obstacles. Sounds like one of my old relationships, actually. Anyway, since we are used to this, well, we are put in a position where we can't defend ourselves. Instead of fighting, we flee from the danger and try to avoid it, making it all the scarier and more threatening when you are feeling trapped. For example, you have no way of defending yourself against Samus X, the Gatherers from Amnesia, SCP-173, Pyramid Head, and even that bloody piano again, other than running away from them. The same feeling of helplessness can be induced with enemies such as the Regenerators, because while they can be defeated, it takes a lot of power and it's very difficult, especially when you don't have the right equipment. They also have a distinct noise that makes them even more horrifying as usual, because once they appear, there is no noise in the hallways aside from their breaths. But once they spot you, a terrifying music starts playing. This can also be applied to the Regenerators, because while it is entirely possible to kill them and not really difficult at all, the feeling of powerlessness and the scream they make are just horrifying. Many times these enemies are positioned in such a way that you have to engage them, risking the possibility that they will scream and paralyze you. On that note, you might remember what I said in my Fortnight Thought video regarding Zelda music, about how the audio affects emotional responses, meaning that they contribute to the atmosphere that the scary moments feed on. The reason jump scares and building scares become so effective has to do with the tone and atmosphere they create. The SCP games have several jump scares all throughout, and so does Slender. But the reason they become all the scarier and effective is because of the tense atmosphere that the gameplay, music, and backstory create. Video games have the strength of immersing the player into their world, especially games like Silent Hill 2, which is one of the most atmospheric game experiences I've ever had. The atmosphere plays an integral part in creating something scary for the player. True, it is made up by many things, so atmosphere is also difficult to accurately pinpoint, but we can say that it lies in the hall, among other things. In the end, one must also remember that what is scary for one person might be enchanting to another. But remember that what is scary is all determined not just by the element in question, but also the atmosphere in the game as a whole. The soul of the video game and the atmosphere are intertwined with each other, meaning that anything scary that happens is the result of the game being able to immerse you in the experience to the point where you can encounter a fictional abomination and maybe become absolutely scarred by it. That in turn is truly fascinating when you really think about it. By making us helpless and unaware of what we are truly facing, video games have been able to scare us to such an amazing degree, and will be able to scare us more in the future. Maybe once again it will tap into our darkest and deepest fears, so be prepared. I'm AlbertKreuger, and don't fall asleep too soon. Halloween has not even begun.